the annual cemetery tour here at Chestnut Hill Cemetery that's sponsored by the East Brunswick Museum. Each year, the museum researches the folks that are buried in the cemetery, and they find documents about them, photographs, objects and artifacts, and they bring together their story in a unique way each year. And the public is invited to walk through the candlelit paths at the cemetery and to listen to the stories of the people that are buried here and to learn a little bit about the history of our community. Chestnut Hill Cemetery was incorporated in 1863. It's what's known as a garden-style cemetery. These types of cemeteries were all the rage in the 1800s. They were designed with the landscape in mind, and they were a way during the Victorian era to beautify death by bringing in the landscape as part of the design concept. So it's no accident when you walk through Chestnut Hill Cemetery that they chose this location situated on a hill overlooking the surrounding area with this wonderful rolling terrain. It's very picturesque, and the tour brings you in at a time that's the cemetery is not often open, but to see what it looks like and the surrounding areas from the top of the hill.
Hello, my name is Alexander Asplund. I was born in 1910. I grew up on Dunham's Corner Road in East Brunswick. I also attended the Dunham's Corner Road schoolhouse. In 1923, I was enrolled in the South River High School since East Brunswick did not have a high school at that time. The dress code was more akin to being more formal. However, outside of that, we were more rambunctious and ambitious. Around this time, we were basically playing pranks on the whole neighborhood. Mischief night wasn't really a thing. It was more of a mischief week. We would go around and basically cause havoc on the entire neighborhood, which led us to either be taking any form of movable property and swapping it with their neighbors. There's also accounts of a teenager taking a rocking chair and putting on somebody's roof. However, on October 10th, 1923, the school bus that I was traveling in, driven by Elwood Sedoyam, age 20 at the time, was reportedly driving 5 miles an hour down Old Bridge Turnpike towards Main Street. However, this found to be not true as he collided with a bakery truck moving on Main Street towards South Amboy. The collision ended up killing me upon impact and injuring 3 others. I was 13 when I died in 1923. The intersection at that time was known as a dangerous intersection, which did also not have a traffic light at that time. 5 years later, in 1928, a traffic light was installed, being the first traffic light in East Brunswick. The traffic light in question is currently on display at the East Brunswick Museum. My father and mother, Alma and John, respectively, paid for my plot to be basically right behind where we're standing. Also, I had 2 sisters, Constance and Edith. Thank you for coming, and drive safely.
Today I am portraying a dead man, Henry Silcox, gravestone carver extraordinaire. I was born in 1793 in Jamesburg, New Jersey, had a stone cutting shop in New Brunswick, New Jersey. When I kicked the bucket in 1846, my sons James and Gabriel took over the company until it was sold in 1872. When I started carving gravestones as a teen, I was working in the medium known as Jersey brownstone, a sedimentary sandstone. And, similar to this, and I was also carving in a style called the neoclassical. When gravestone symbolism first appeared in the colonies, it had appeared in the form of mortality imagery, which was brought over by the Puritans, medieval images of death. They believed in predestination, which was God decided you were going to heaven or hell before you were born. Nothing you could do about it except look for that you are one of God's elect. So if your wart disappeared, thank you, God. It's a sign. So, it was your life spirit has taken flight from your mortal remains. Here lies the body. It was just the facts, nothing that alluded to your spiritual fate. That would have been knowing the mind of God. No good. Contemporaneous with mortality imagery was salvation imagery. Winged cherubs or guardian angels or soul effigies, any one of those, were becoming popular. and they were a more hopeful symbol, but they still were not telling you whether or not you went to heaven, because most of these angels are scowling. Pretty much, it's just because I'm wearing wings doesn't mean you're going to heaven, buddy. They lasted into the 19th century, whereas mortality imagery stopped about 1780 in New Jersey. That's a brief history of gravestone symbolism in Western culture. And the carving technique remained mallets and chisels and manual pretty much up until the 1870s, when pneumatic tools were invented, and it revolutionized stone cutting, making the introduction of granite more economically feasible because it is one of the hardest stones available. And it is the stone of choice today.
Good evening. I'm William Appleby. I was born in 1844 right here in the village of Oldbridge. I was just reading my journal entry dated April 18th, 1865. In it I wrote, "The past few days have been splendid. Such weather is seldom surpassed, mild and warm, a fine breeze blowing from the south, and all passes pleasant. I'm thankful for God's blessing of good health and comfort. Yesterday I was making a pair of pants. Today I have been making out a muster roll, which I've now just finished. A muster roll is a list of officers and men in the military. All has been well. The Fulton Mail is just in, bringing us the sad news of the death of our President Lincoln by poison. Undoubtedly the work of an assassin. It will fall heavily on the nation, but thank God he has lived to see the rebellion crushed. I thank God he spared him to us for this long. For now, we can bear it much better. May the first hand of retribution arrest the murderer and be punished. I'm enjoying good health today and am happy trusting in Christ at all times." I don't recall how long it took for me to realize that he had been shot, not poisoned. I served in the Union Army during the Civil War with two of my brothers in the 28th Regiment of the New Jersey Volunteers. I was severely wounded and discharged. After recovering, I joined the Navy and served on the board of the USS Nantucket for the remainder of the war. I saw a great deal of action. After the war, I married Martha Austin of Brooklyn, and we lived on a large farm on Old Stage Road, which you can see in these pictures right here. Martha and I had 4 daughters and 3 sons. My sons and I cleared the 40 acres of farmland, and we grew more than enough to support our large family with plenty left to sell in our Appleby General Store. I worked in and later owned the general store that my father James and Uncle Leonard started. My Uncle Leighton's oldest son Albert became my partner in running the store. We sold everything from medical supplies to wash tubs. The Appleby General Store also housed the Oldbridge Post Office for a time and was a gathering place for discussions of the latest news. I served as postmaster for a time. The post office was run out of general stores in those days. It switched between the Applebys and Jollies depending on the political affiliation of U.S. President. When the Republicans were in office, the Applebys ran it. And when the Democrats were in office, the Jollies ran it. The Appleby General Store operated for 134 years from 1828 until June 30th, 1962. 4 generations of Applebee's ran the small store, which sold a large variety of products in a small building that is still standing today over on Main Street near the traffic light near Old Bridge Turnpike. The population of East Brunswick increased by 250% during the 1950s and simply couldn't compete with the likes of Two Guys, JCPenney's, and whichever other department stores there were in those days. Besides farming and working the general store and post office, I was also a carpenter. I helped build many of the first houses on the Douglas College campus, which were used as dormitories. The college was then known as the New Jersey College for Women. Thank you for visiting me.
Good evening. I'm Hendrick Brown. I was born June 1833 on a farm in Browntown, a section of now what is modern-day Old Bridge. Browntown was named after my family. I married the lovely Sarah Crowell of Perth Amboy, and we had 3 lovely children, Amelia, Howard, and Josephine. I dedicated my whole life to public service. I was surveyor of highways, supervisor of county roads, and I was elected to the Middlesex County Board of Chosen Freeholders. I was a member of the County Board of Elections. I was an active member of the Democratic Union and wanted to support our government and President Lincoln during the Civil War. We wanted to preserve the Union and deny the right of any state to secede from that Union. I presided over the county's Court of Quarter Sessions. It was established for the benefit of accused persons who desired a fair and speedy trial. Some of my most famous cases included Mr. John Ward, accused of stealing a horse and buggy. He was found guilty. I sentenced him to hard labor for the state prison for a term of 4 years. I also dealt with property disputes. Some neighbors we like, others we don't. And I granted liquor licenses to sell ale and malt liquor, something we can all get behind. The newspaper mentioned there was once a man who was so drunk he celebrated the 4th of July by throwing his wife and children around and using them as bass drums. Guilty and sent to prison. In 1884, the wise and knowledgeable Governor Abbott appointed me to serve as the judge of Court of Errors and Appeals for the state. The Court of Errors and Appeals was the highest court in New Jersey. The name of the court was derived from the function of hearing appeals and correcting previous court errors in judgment. Thank you. Court is now adjourned.
My name is Mary N. Layton. have lived in this area my entire life, and I continue to do so. Right on the front side of the Chestnut Hill Cemetery tour. I was born in 1849, and my husband Charles was born in 1846. I continued to live in this area until I died at the age of 78 in 1925, and my husband died at the age of 82 in 1928. We've seen a lot of changes in East Brunswick in our time, and I'm proud to talk about what we did to help build the East Brunswick community. East Brunswick was a very predominant farming community, and farmers bring a lot more than just crops. We were grist mill owners. My husband Charles owned the Layton Grist Mill, which was located on River Road and Bournetown Avenue in the Old Bridge section of East Brunswick. We were quite prosperous, as many of the local farmers brought their wheat and their corn to be ground into flour and cornmeal. We would oftentimes sell the extra cornmeal and flour to other markets along the eastern seaboard, as we would load up the ships on the South River and they would depart to other destinations all along the East Coast. We were quite prosperous, and by the time 1906 came around and East Brunswick was starting to change, we donated land for a firehouse that was the first ever firehouse in the East Brunswick area. It is located on Pine Street, just right down the hill. When my husband passed away, he was very famous as he was one of the founding members of the firehouse and the fire department, that a bill was made in his honor, which still stands today. It is quite ironic that all of our livelihood has been destroyed by fire. By the 1930s, our grist mill was facing competition from larger mills out west, and we were forced to close. Our grist mill was ran on gasoline fuel instead of more common means of water and wind, and occasionally animal power. We did quite well, but unfortunately, times had to change, and we had to go with it. As our grist mill closed, it changed hands, and at the end, it became a famous restaurant known as Pete's Pizza. Everything was gone by the 1980s when a large fire broke out, and the restaurant was deemed had too much extensive damage that was forced to be torn down. So it's now, all of our livelihood is now just an empty lot on River Road. Our stone is very popular. It is a cylindrical granite, because having a carved rounded stone is quite extensive work. Like the capital's not on top of it, it shows that our life's work was not finished in time.
Hope that you enjoyed the cemetery tour here at Chestnut Hill Cemetery, had an opportunity to learn about the folks that are buried here, and we hope to see you on the tour soon.